I think we can get started. We've got a great group of people here ready to listen to your story and to this interview. So I guess why don't I kick it off by welcoming everybody to the event today. I'm so proud and honored to be hosting this with my good friend Helen, who has written a book called Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool, and we're going to be talking about that today. And I guess first of all, I just want to say, I read this in 2 days, James's Journey. I'm not sure, you can't even see it. James's Journey, Helen's first book, and I couldn't put it down. And that just attests to what we're about to hear today about the work that, and the authoring skills that you've put together of writing these historical books. And today we're going to talk about your new book that you're about to release. So I'm going to give a little bit of a biographical introduction for Helen and let everybody know Helen was born and raised in Helsingborg, Sweden, and lives in New York City. She loves the city's rich multicultural community, especially its main cuisines, grounding her historical novels in scholarly research. She brings readers back in time by putting them in the minds of the characters. Intrigued by activity in the day-to-day life that explain what people were thinking, she sheds light on how people on the wrong side of history justified their actions. Learning not only that people acted in a certain way, but why, gives readers insight into the past. Helen is especially inspired by people who had the courage to challenge the beliefs that they were raised to accept, thus breaking the cycle of racism, sexism, and injustice. Today, we are here to celebrate the release of Helen's new book, Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool. Thank you so much for inviting me. And I guess I should have introduced myself. My name is Julie Smithson, and I'm a good friend of both Helen and Ben's. And I'm so happy to be here today. And maybe I'll turn the floor over to you just to say hello to everybody, and then we'll dig right into it.
Sure. I'm so glad to have you here, Julie, and thank you so much for being the one to interview me. So excited. And thank you so much, everyone who's here, who's joining me for this. This is starting to seem really real now. My book is actually coming out, and I'm starting to feel very good about it. This is the first official event about it, so I'm so excited. And thank you all so much for coming.
Great. Well, let's get started with your new book. So your book, Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool, is set in Sweden, and it's a story about a suffragette and an unwed mother in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool is coming out on June 30th this year, so you must be very, very excited about that. So maybe let's start with the title. What is the significance of the title of Sour Milk in Sheep's Wool? What does that mean?
It's very significant, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm sorry. I would spoil the plot for you. So no, I can't tell you. You're going to have to guess that for a while, but you will see. It becomes very clear why I chose that title.
Oh, come on. You have to tell us a little bit about it. Yeah, at least a little bit about the main characters. That's why everybody showed up. I know that on the cover, in some of the, advertisements, we have a couple of characters, Annette and Hannah. And maybe if you could tell us a little bit about them and set the story up. What are we excited to read about?
Sure. Let me start with Hannah. She grew up in Lund. And if you're Swedish, you can tell where Julie is sitting and what she has behind her. And that is the landmark of Lund, Lund's cathedral. And Hannah grew up there in this town. It's a small but significant Swedish university town. And Hannah is very confident. She's a feminist, though people didn't call it feminism yet, at least not in Sweden. It wasn't a word used then. And she's very well read, and so she feels very confident in her opinions, and she feels that when people ask her questions, she always thinks like, I'm glad I have read so much because I know how to answer this. And she's confident and happy about that. And she is an entrepreneur. Her dream is to start a bakery. Annette She's shyer. She grew up in a little town outside of Lund called Hardeberga. Everybody knows everybody. She's an unwed mother, and she's very ashamed of this. And she's trying to hide it as much as she can. She spends a lot of time worrying about what people think of her, and she's not comfortable.
Okay. Well, being unwed back in that time, obviously people had their opinions, their perspectives of that type of life. So, what were the attitudes towards unmarried mothers during the 19th and 20th centuries in Sweden?
It was not acceptable at all. And not only was it not acceptable, they called women with children out of wedlock whores. And that wasn't just a figure of speech, or they didn't use that only to refer to sex workers, but to unwed mothers. And not only that, there were superstitions that made this a really, really hard fact to live with. And there were these superstitions had a very negative impact on unwed mothers during this time, and Net will experience this, and this particular superstition is very prevalent in her life, unfortunately.
Mm. So are there any issues in sour milk and sheep's wool that women are still struggling with today?
Yes, reproductive justice, especially, and in particular here in the United States. There is a case in the Supreme Court as we speak that is challenging our right to abortion. And in Texas, just about, I think last month, a month and a half ago, it became illegal to have an abortion later than 6 weeks of pregnancy. 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's it's kind of crazy that we have to have this conversation again today with rights of women and having the rights of their own bodies and certain situations. It's a difficult subject to think that we're still challenged today with something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it really is. It really is hard to comprehend.
Yeah. I know that one of the historical figures portrayed in your new book is Elise Ottensen Jensen. So maybe you can share a little bit about who she was.
Sure. She was a pioneer and a revolutionary and a very, very brave woman, because she educated the public about contraceptives and sexuality when it was illegal to do so.
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, she helped women try out diaphragms in the back of her lecture halls, where she had just spoken about sexuality and contraceptives. And she even helped women in the back of cars or in outhouses to try them out. And she co-founded International Planned Parenthood Federation.
Wow. What a woman to be able to allow, to basically make that happen in, behind the scenes, behind and hidden, and supporting women that way. That's really incredible. And then, going on to basically find the International Planned Parenthood Federation. So that's it's so interesting that you've brought her as part of the story in your book. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So before the women's suffrage movement in Sweden, did women have any say on how they conducted their lives?
Somewhat, I should say. There were a couple of milestones that were very important. One in particular that sticks out to me is that in 1864, it became illegal for husbands to physically punish their wives. And just think of that. It was just hard to even think of it, but that was quite the milestone. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Oh, I just said it's hard to comprehend that, where we are today. But back then, that was something that, and that changing in 1864 must have been a huge, catalyst to the movement itself.
Yeah, it must have been. Really must have been. Mm-hmm. And I'm always wondering what the men thought of this. But anyway, you can also say in 1870, women could go to university, which was a big deal. And in 1884, if you were not married, you were considered a legal adult when you turned 21. If you were not married, that is.
Wow. Yeah, you and we talked a little bit about this the other day, and I was trying to wrap my head around that, and I was thinking, okay, so if you weren't married, you were not considered an adult until this law was changed, obviously. And if I was 28 or 25 and I still wasn't married, I wasn't considered an adult. And to wrap our heads around that, it just doesn't even seem unfathomable.
Right?
So so that was 1884 that changed. And again, another catalyst moment that, would have, put more thought behind the changes that needed to be made, and giving the women the empowerment of, who they are, to, basically start that movement of change, and especially during that time. Yeah. No, absolutely. So, so when did Swedish women finally win the right to vote then, if they were allowed to be adults? If women were allowed to be adults in 1884, when could they then start to, to vote and partake in bigger conversations, so to speak?
Let me answer that question in 1 second. It sounds like I have something up and that somebody's sending me messages because I hear beeps. Let me just see. Let's see. Yeah, let me turn this off. That might be what was beeping. Okay, sorry about that. I'm sorry. Could you please ask that again?
Sure. No, when did Swedish women finally win the right to vote after, years of these changes and that sort of thing? So.
Oh, right. In 1919, and they voted for the first time in a general election in 1921. So it's 100 years ago this year.
Wow. So what a time for you to release your book at this, stage of, 100 years of anniversary of that, significant moment in history where women could have a say.
Thank you. Yeah, it really is a good time, a very good time.
Yeah. So what about men during this time in Sweden? Did they always have a right to vote? I know that's kind of a random question, but did they always have the right to vote?
No, it's a great question because they didn't. Before 1909, men couldn't vote unless they were above a certain pay grade.
Interesting.
Let me just add one thing about the women. We got distracted when I had to check the beeping sound there. But one interesting part is that women who were unmarried and considered legal adults and were wealthy enough, they could vote in local elections already in 1862. And it's interesting, wealth, and if they were considered legal adults.
Sure. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add that. My fault for having beeping sounds.
That's okay. So what is it that inspired Swedish women to begin to fight for the right to vote and for the right of, as persons? What was that a significant moment there?
A big influence was the temperance movement. And women joined organizations in Sweden that encourage people not to drink. And this was simply because it would be easier to reason with their husbands if they weren't always drunk. And by doing this, they had more control in their marriages. And it would be easier for them to tell their husbands to please not have sex right now because they want to plan their pregnancies and space their births so they don't have a child every year. And there was no birth control, really. It was very taboo. So this wasn't really something that they even considered at that time.
That's so interesting. When we were talking about this the other day, not that I never put the two and two together, but actually thinking about, whether or not to serve your husband a drink that night, knowing that there could be sex, and how that would align with, your system as far as, whether your body would be, you would actually get pregnant at that time, and timing that. I think that's huge. It's a huge way of, and that actually went on to, be the inspiration to this movement of trying to plan your pregnancy around serving your husband alcohol at night with dinner, basically.
Yeah, right. It really is. And it's interesting too, when you think back on Elise Ottesen Jensen. One of the things she spoke about a lot was that women were, happy the first 2, 3, maybe 4 children. Then when they had the 5th and the 6th and the 8th and the 11th and the 12th, Elise Ottesen Jensen's mother gave birth to 18 children.
Wow.
This is just picture
18. Oh my
18
goodness.
children.
Wow.
So I think that was one of her reasons for feeling so strongly about birth
I
control.
could understand that. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, your book is based on Swedish history, and I know you're Swedish, and thank you so much for inviting me. Just so everybody knows, I have Danish in my background, so it was a little bit of alignment there in our backgrounds, and again, an honor to host you today and interview you today. So, do you feel nostalgic for your homeland when you write about Swedish places and talk about the Swedish history?
Yes, very much. Especially when I write about the Swedish countryside. There's just something in the nature of our country. It's just so beautiful. And it's like it's in my blood. And it is genetically. And I feel it. It's this really warm feeling. And it's been really nice to write about Swedish history. Makes me feel very connected.
Sure. Well, there's definitely a lot of history here. And so my question to you is, what do you as a writer think it's important to keep in mind about writing about an earlier era? Because, there's a lot of historical dates. You and I were going through saying there's a lot of dates to remember, but, significantly here, we're 100 years later from that moment where, women were regarded as adults. So, writing about all of this history, what is your, what are the important things to keep in mind when you're doing that?
What I think I find the most important is to realize that they're not us. And they were affected by the discourse they heard in their lives. They were a product of their time. And it's important to not make them too ahead of their time. And to take an example from my women in the 19th century and early 20th century in Sweden, most feminists were against abortion. Abortion was way ahead of time. They existed, but not like we have today. They were very dangerous at that time. They were against birth control. And that's very, very shocking.
Why do you think that they were against birth control?
One of the reasons was they were nervous that men would just take advantage of women, have sex with them, and then leave. And to add to this and give us more of an understanding, it was not legal for a woman to get married if she wasn't a virgin. And that was a law that was abolished in 1921. So you can, for us, it's, but a guy could use this and said, no, you're not a virgin. I'm not going to marry you. So it's complicated, and it's very much part of my story, so I don't want to get into it too much. But that's generally speaking, they were afraid that men would have sex and then leave, and then they would left a woman who wasn't a virgin anymore. It'd be harder for her to get married.
Right. So I guess my question to you is, do you have a personal connection to the storyline in Sour Milk and Sheep's Wool?
Yes, Annette is my great grandmother. She was my father's grandmother, his father's mother. And so I feel very, very connected to her. And I never met her. She died in 1940. And but I really feel like I want to tell her story. And it was very interesting when I did research and had learned about her. And no one talked about this. In my family, I thought my grandfather had two siblings, um, and he didn't live with them. He had a twin sister. He didn't live with her. And then I started to do genealogy, and I'm not going to give away too much here, but there were more than three, and no one spoke about this. And she didn't marry. And so,
did you, at what age did you discover this story? Was it just, in the, like, did you learn about this when you were younger, or were you an adult when you learned about this history?
I learned that she had worked in castles, and there's a castle outside of Helsingborg where I found out that my great grandmother had worked. So I had a very, very romantic look, and my imagination went wild. And there were a lot of stories, but there were a lot of ghosts and hauntings in this castle, my grandfather said, but that was it. They didn't say anything else. But I was intrigued because she worked in a castle. And when you read my book, you'll see that that she was near more than one castle, actually, but she didn't live in the castle. And it wasn't as romantic as I thought at all. She had many children without being married, and no one in my family spoke about this.
Wow.
And
wow. So what about Hannah? She's your second protagonist in the story. What about her? Do you have a connection to her?
Yes, and especially since she fought for a right to vote. And I think I speak for all women that we're very grateful that we can partake in our elections. And I think maybe especially for Americans who voted in the last election, it's very important. But we shouldn't take it for granted. It's not easy everywhere in the world to vote, not even in the United States, and especially not for women and marginalized groups. So.
Right. Interesting. Well, I think this would be a perfect opportunity for you to read something. Maybe you can read an excerpt from your book.
Sure.
And then to all the audience members, we're going to take some questions after this. So if you do have a question, maybe just write it in the chat, and then I'll discuss it with Helen after. And I'm going to pass it over to you because I know I'm really excited to hear a few of these passages. I haven't read them myself either, obviously, because we haven't read the book. So we're all excited. It is a first.
Me too. It's the first time this is happening publicly. So I have it on my screen. So let me just find it and minimize you guys. And then here, let's see where it is. Hold on. Sorry. It is somewhere here. I apologize. It is. I thought I had brought it up before, but I have the Zoom window. And let me see. Something else is coming up. Bear with me. Oh, it is here. I had just fallen down. Okay, here we go. Let's see. And can you all see me now? Because I have gone off screen. You see me, right?
Yeah, we can see you. Yep.
Okay. Let's see.
We're going to set the stage here. Set the stage for,
yes.
Yeah. And what chapter of the book are you going to be reading?
I was thinking reading part of chapter 1 and part of chapter 2.
Great.
So, Lund, Sweden, 1889. Annette. Annette knocked and waited for the door to open, taking a deep breath to calm her racing heart. There were no voices or steps inside, indicating that someone had heard. She knocked again. Nothing. She exhaled slowly. It couldn't be more than a minute or two past the hour now. She had taken note of the time when she walked past the clockmaker's shop. The parson's wife, who had helped her find the safe house so she could have her baby in secret, had assured her she was to show up at this address at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Maybe the mothers were putting their babies down to nap and couldn't come to the door. Relief flooded her. She could delay the unavoidable, if even for a moment. Picking up her bulky valise, she walked down the steps and out the front gate in the fence surrounding the property, turned and looked up at the red wooden house. It was enormous, 3 stories with 4 windows on each. She would spend a good part of a year there, sewing for upkeep until she had given birth and weaned the baby. Her belly pointed straight out, round and firm. There wasn't any way to deny it anymore. As soon as she stepped into that house, she would be an unwed mother. Straightening her skirts, she looked down the cobblestone street and the homes along it, feeling foolish for having felt relief when no one opened the door. When leaving home this morning, she had tied a scarf over her hair so people would think her a married woman. But it surely wouldn't deceive anyone seeing her standing outside of this house. What if the headmistress disapproved, thinking it a lie as sinful as having a baby without being married? The thought sent a wave of nausea up her throat, burning it. She swallowed it down. Time ticked by, but the house remained silent and dark. A couple entered the street up ahead and headed in her direction. The woman was looking right at her. Annette retied the ends of the headscarf under her chin, and pushed a loose strand of hair under the fabric. Her hands were shaking, but she kept herself straight and didn't avert her eyes. Then they made a sudden left and disappeared down a side street. Annette gasped with relief and grabbed hold of the fence to steady herself as her breathing slowed. Perhaps it had never been their intention to walk down this way after all. She had to try not to panic every time she saw someone. No one knew her here. As if to affirm her resolve, she heard the clip-clop of hooves, and a carriage laden with sacks of potatoes and firewood came around the same corner. The horse headed straight toward her at a steady trot and stopped in front of the house. A heavy-set middle-aged woman wearing a large brown hat festooned with feathers sat next to the driver. She climbed down and waved as he drove off. "You must be Miss Lundström. I'm Miss Anderson, the owner here," she said, and gestured toward the house, then reached out to shake her hand. Miss Anderson's gaze was open and searching, not unkind, and she didn't seem to notice her scarf. Annette shook her hand and hid a small sigh of relief. "You don't look too large yet, but you're at 7 months already?" "Yes, soon." "I hope you weren't waiting too long. One of my girls had her baby today, and we had to take her to the hospital. Complications." Annette felt a wave of panic at the word. "Is she all right?" "She lost a lot of blood, but she'll be fine. I have 4 other girls living with me now, but they're all out on the town this afternoon." "Oh, we're allowed to go out?" Miss Anderson looked surprised for a moment, then frowned. "What did you think? That I'm running a prison?" She didn't seem offended, just genuinely puzzled. "No, of course not. I just meant..." Annette blushed deeply, wishing she had kept it to herself, but wondering how the other mothers felt being out in public. Weren't they all there to hide their pregnancies?
Wow, that was great. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Okay, we have a new hat. Let's
Chapter
see.
2,
Chapter
Hannah.
2.
Hannah looked at her reflection as I walked past the glove maker's large window. She turned her hat a little to the left, hoping that she would look proper and wouldn't be mistaken for one of the unwed mothers who lived in the house. Magnhild, walking beside her, raised an eyebrow at her, but she pretended not to notice. She had met Magnhild at a women's reading circle a couple of years ago, while they were discussing A Doll's House by Ibsen. As soon as Magnhild started talking, she knew she had to become friends with her. The play, Magnhild said, only represented upper-class women, the ones who had maids to help with everything. Didn't mention the women who did everything themselves, cooking, cleaning, taking care of all the children, and who may even work themselves. The other women in the circle, including the host, had been aghast, which only encouraged Magnhild. It had prompted such a heated discussion that Magnhild was told to leave and not come back. Hannah had been so impressed with the way Magnhild stood up for herself and what she had said that she followed her out and decided not to come back either. They had been best friends ever since. Last year, they both attended a famous or infamous, depending on your political leanings, women's meeting in Denmark, where Emily Ratu spoke about the importance of husbands staying sober so their wives could reason with them. Impressed, they joined the Good Templars and organized a small group of friends to meet once a month. At first, they gathered at each other's houses, but with husbands and other family members around, it was difficult to discuss women's issues freely. Then Bengta, who was a midwife, arranged for them to meet in the storeroom of Miss Helga Anderson's sewing workshop, which doubled as a home for unwed mothers. It was a godsend. Will Bengta be there tonight? Hannah asked as the house came into view. Magnhild nodded. Yes, she'll be bringing a friend. Good, another member. I hope she told her that Helga reminded us to slip in quietly to avoid interacting with the residents. She's worried it could cause problems if rumors start that we're trying to convert them to our cause. Magnhild threw her head back and laughed. Right, you can't be too careful with women like us around. Hannah grinned. It's not as if this place isn't controversial already.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're
That's so
very
interesting.
welcome.
So interesting.
welcome.
Well, I guess we're going to take some questions from the audience, and I know Daniel he asked you a question just a while back, and maybe we'll just kick off with this, and then I'd like to talk a little bit about Sweden's history as well as what's happening tomorrow. But first of all, Helen, was there something in our modern history that triggered the idea for sour milk for you?
Women's rights. And also especially reproductive justice, and how controversial it still is, and how women don't have agency over their own thoughts, their bodies, and women are still asked, could be anything, but they're asked, are you sure this is what you want? Like, yes, I just told you this is what I do. This is what I'm doing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But did you make this choice yourself? Are you sure that's what you want to do?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I just told you that. And they don't ask men that question. They're saying, oh, wow, you decided to do this. Great. Why? Oh, that's so interesting. I never thought of that. But women were still questioned. It's 2021. And also to tie back to that a little, when I did research for Annette, and I went to the places where she worked, people said when they found out that she was an unwed mother, and this is a long time ago, because I put this book down and wrote my other novel and my children's book, but a few years ago, still in very modern times, they were saying, so she was one of those women. She had so many men. And well, would you have asked a man that? And or said
Right.
commented like that about a man? And could you think that maybe there were reasons for her life, and that immediately come to a judgment?
Mm-hmm.
And I feel, we've come very, very far, but we're not
there
yet.
No, especially with this law that was just passed in the United States that you were talking about earlier about the abortion rights. And, you shake your head thinking, all of this happened 100 years ago, and here we are still talking about it. And it's so crazy to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from Maria. Did you spend a lot of time in Sweden to do your research?
Yes, I did. When I first started doing this research, we didn't have the internet yet. So this book has been brewing for a long time. And so I spent time in Sweden going to physical libraries, getting physical books out, traveling to the places where Annette worked and where the suffragists were and what they did. And it was kind of a blessing, actually, that I put this book down and did other work, because since it's 100 years now since Swedish women have had the ability to vote, and the internet is full of resources, and because Sweden is celebrating this. And even before that happened, just having the internet, borrowing books, it's very easy. And what's really amazing is that you can go to the main library here in New York City, and you can borrow books, physical books internationally, and they'll send them over from Sweden to you. And so it's really amazing. But yeah, I did.
So maybe that's a great way to lead into, you know, what this weekend is in Sweden and what tomorrow is.
It is our national day. It used to be our flag day, but since 1983, it's been considered our national day. A little like 4th of July, I guess, or Canada Day.
And Denmark actually has Constitution Day tomorrow as well. So
really?
It's yeah. So there's definitely a tie in there with Sweden celebrating as well as as well as Denmark as well.
Oh yeah, I didn't know that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah.
I know. I saw one of the photos that you posted in LinkedIn the other day was of the farm, and then you with the cows, and then you mentioned how the southern part of Sweden actually used to be part of Denmark, which I didn't know that personally myself. So I believe maybe, and if we have any historians in the audience too that can help us out with that, a little bit of history, but I don't know what year that was taken over by Sweden, and maybe that was in celebration of that time.
Well, I have two answers to that. First answer, you're going to have to read my next book, because one of the wars between Denmark and Sweden is in that book, but it's not coming out for maybe a year or two at least. Yeah, the southern Sweden, Skåne or Scania, was Danish, and they actually went back and forth a couple of times. And Maria Bellamy, who's also from my hometown, can you confirm, was this 1707 the last war when Sweden took over? I think it was 1707, right?
I don't know the year.
What?
I don't know the year.
I think it's 1707. I have to get back to you, but I'm not sure. But it was the last, and we have a statue in one of our harbors of Magnus Stenbock, who is, was the military leader of that time when the war was won. And every April 1st, Helsingborg has April 1st joke where they say, yeah, Denmark is coming. They're removing the statue. They don't want the statue there. And but by now, I think we all know that it's an April 1st joke. But
we have another question from Pernilla. Did you get a feeling of that women supported women, and how is it today? Many times we are very hard to each other. So I guess, did you get that feeling that women supported the women through that time? Did a wed mother support an unwed mother through that time?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think, especially since birth control was so taboo, that, and you notice a little when Hannah walked to the house there, that she was a little nervous, that people think she was an unwed mother, and they were nervous about the neighbors having two controversial issues there, unwed mothers and temperance women meeting in that group. Those superstitions that I mentioned, I don't want to spoil the plot too much, made it so women were not so supportive of unwed mothers. It was tough. But I also get a sense that women in the women's rights groups, like Hannah has a really good group of friends, and they're very supportive of each other, and they really work together for women. So what do you guys think? I think it's pretty similar to today, maybe. We feel we want to help each other as women, but then we're humans, so.
That's right. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Oh, here we go. Will there be a Swedish translation of the book? Maria's asking.
Oh yeah, I don't know. As long as I don't do it, I would love that. I'd love that.
Sure, sure. And maybe remind everybody when your book is coming out and how they can get their copy.
June 30th, it will be out. You will be able to pre-order it within a weekish or so on Amazon, and after that, it will be out in bookstores and other online places, but that won't be until June 30th. But
Wonderful.
check for pre-order and check if you're on Goodreads, you can add it to your to-read list there.
Amazing, amazing. Well, is there anything else, Helen, that you'd like to share about your book? Oh, there's one more question. We'll ask this one. As unwed mothers were not embraced 100 years ago, what impact has it had on women in Sweden to date? Is it more acceptable?
Yeah, now I think it's very acceptable. But I would, again, so as not to spoil too much about how many children Annette has as an unwed mother, I would say it depends on how many children you have. But also in Sweden, marriage is more of a romantic idea. If I compare to the United States, here I think it is still more expected that you will get married. And people are still domestic partners and they still call each other partners and they choose not to marry each other. But in Sweden, that is more common than here. And so, and it's sexuality, it's more accepted. It's not something Swedes feels very controversial. It seems very natural. And now in hindsight, I wonder how much Elise Jensen had to do with that and that movement, because that was very early on. And there were other movements too that were more controversial that happens earlier in the book that I don't want to spoil the plot with. But now I think as a Swede growing up in Sweden, I never had that I've understood from my American friends, that it was controversial to use birth control or that abortion was controversial. I didn't grow up with that. There was sexual education early. You learned about your body and you learned how to protect yourself. It wasn't a thing.
So, right. Yeah, times have certainly changed, but still so much to change too in the ideals of women being able to have control of their own bodies and especially when it comes to pregnancy. So yeah, well, I can honestly say, after I read James's journey, in a couple of days, I enjoyed your writing very much so, and even my mom's on the line too. We were talking we were talking about how this book should be part of educational curriculum to understand, James's journey is a little bit different, but still all of these books that you're writing, brings us into, allows us to learn about history and what paths have been paved to the way that we're living today. And, that we're still struggling with, coming to terms of pregnancy and women's rights and things like that, and that we have to continue this work. And I truly believe that with communities and people like yourself, Helen, that highlighting these topics will only create better movements and changes of people's minds more and more. So thank you so much for the writing that you've done. And on behalf of all of us, I think we're all excited to read your book and learn more about Hannah and Annette and your history as well. So thank you so much.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. This is so wonderful, and thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I think at this time, I know that Helen's got a lot of friends on here, and maybe anybody that would like to ask her a personal question, you feel free to, if you want to open your mic, and we'll try and take turns if there's any questions out there.
Yeah, let's open up the room and let me check my my scarf hair and my hat hair. I'll do, it's fine. Hey, so nice to see you.
This is actually Sherry Hudson. I go by Lynn now. And I just want to say I've been hearing about this book for a long time, and I'm so happy that you've written it and it's going to be out, and I am looking forward to reading it.
Oh, thank you so much. I am getting really excited too. Thank you.
Hey, Helene.
Hey, hey.
So I'm also from Helsingborg, just like Helen, and we haven't seen each other for a lot of years, but I've followed you on Facebook and you know, with the connection and everything, we're from the same town. So I would love to, when I go back to Sweden next time, to go and visit these places in the book.
Oh yeah, it'd be amazing.
I would love that.
I would love that. Maybe we could do that together. I should set up a little tour. You should all come after the pandemic.
That would be amazing.
At least do it visually. If we can't all be there, film it so we can see it visually.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, I will definitely do that. And if you follow me on Facebook, I have put some teasers out and photos of some of the places where Annette worked, and also Lund city where Hannah lived. And some of these places are amazing. There's a castle that I have shared called Häckeberga Castle, and it is now like a conference center, I think. But there are other places that are tourist areas that are open for visitors. So there will be a lot of places to visit. And
Jag hänger gärna med också. Sorry.
Hey, yay.
I'm joining as well when you come to Sweden.
Yes, please, please.
Yes.
Did you meet each other, Maria and Pernilla? You may have.
Didn't we meet at where was it? Haven there? No, maybe.
No.
Oh no, you didn't. You weren't there.
No. Okay.
No.
Earlier, I think you may have.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
Maybe I can't remember. No, yeah.
Maybe,
okay.
but then it's a long time ago. Yeah.
Yeah, but we will. Pernilla lives in Malmö now,
Yeah.
but it's not far from Helsingborg, so we should definitely arrange for this.
Mm-hmm.
I would just like to say, Helen, how lovely it is to meet you. We've followed each other on Twitter and Facebook, and we've emailed each other, and we've got so many of the same views. I just know we'd get on if we met.
Oh,
even
yes.
though we live so far apart.
Yeah, we really do, but we've really connected. Judy is also a writer of historical fiction, writing about the 17th century, and her books are amazing. And it's so nice to see your face. I've seen photographs, but to actually see you, it's wonderful.
We both share the same views on how important research is, don't we? To get back into the period, travel back in time and take your readers with you. And also the characters, you do the same as me. You make them true to their period. That's what I try to do as well. Judge them on the period and the time they lived in and their attitudes. And I think you do it so well. And I'm looking forward to reading your new book.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, congrats, Helen. I just want to say Judy and I are very proud of you, and we really look forward to getting the paperback. I already have it on my to read list.
Oh, yay.
Yeah, and this was great. This was great to get a taste of it. We're really excited for you. So congrats.
Oh, thank you so much.
Sure.
Helen, I'll say the same for Clayton and I are so proud of you, and I'm excited to read the book. And I love the visuals that you've painted for us. Like, I can see the cobblestone, I can see the big red house, I can see the scarf. So I love that you've given us visuals that we can put ourselves there and be a part of the story. So I'm very, very excited to read it, and congrats. You are awesome. We loved your other book. So you are awesome and an awesome friend. And we're so happy to take this journey and celebrate with you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Oh.
Thank you.
And it's great. I have two daughters, they are 12 and 14, to give them the history and the women thought today in all the cyber world, just to let them know our rights and everything we can do. We can really do anything we want. Thank you.
No, thank you. And we can.
Yes.
And getting together like this together with women, and there are men here too. I'm very happy about that. But it's just wonderful. Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful. What a great group of friends. And it's so so interesting to see how we've brought the world together, right? To announce your book and also bring together that history that, you know, continues not only in Sweden, but in many other countries, and still issues that we need to keep talking about. And our job isn't done.
No,
right?
it's not done. Nope,
Right.
it is not done. But
Mhm.
we've come a little further, but it's not done. I'm a little curious about Canada and suffrage in Canada and how that is there. I'd love to hear a little about that if you're.
Yeah, you know, there's movements in, you know, I guess the what is it called? The five, which is the Supreme Court. There was some great leaders that led to, you know, allow women in the legal front to be part of the Supreme Court. And we were, you know, we obviously had that movement there. I, you know, for myself, current day today, and I know Karen Alexander is on the call as well, not necessarily from Canada, but still joining this global group. We have a group of XR women who are focused on gender balance, diversity, and advocating for each other, empowering each other, and inspiring each other as we're you know, we are now in this remote and virtual world where there's a whole bunch of skill sets that we need, and we need to change the education of how women are perceived in the business world, but also be able to offer all the tools and resources to have the same equal opportunities as men do. So I guess, you know, from my perspective, coming from Canada, that's one of the movements that I'm working on, and proud to be part of that as the community, you know, reaching out to the community on a global level of all raising up ourselves up together and inspiring each other. And I think through, you know, your event that you've done today, it's a great, you know, it's a great stage for, you know, groups of women to become more powerful together and create change.
It's a strange fact that when, you know, Emily Pankhurst was a suffragette in our time in England at the same time, and far from supporting the suffragettes, a lot of women were really against them. And, you know, these were brave women themselves, have to fight for exactly the same sort of things, really. But not all women thought it was a good thing. They thought they were unfeminine, and, you know, they should know their place. It's so strange that women should take that attitude when it's obviously to their benefit to be emancipated. What's the problem? You know?
Yeah.
It's there we were. That was the way it was.
It was, and it's fascinating to learn about that, because it's very true. There were I have a conversation in Sour Milk and Sheep Wool where Hannah is talking to a woman who doesn't understand it, and I can spoil it just a little. And she says, you know, women, we're busy with our children, and we don't have time, and this is not, why would we focus on this? My role is as a woman, as a mother, and as a household. That's my pride is, that's what I'm proud of. And it's, and then Hannah, I spoil it just a little. She says, but this is why you should have a say, because you come from this perspective. It's an important perspective. But yeah, they are right. Some women were not. They didn't like this. Right?
Helen,
And we see that today too. I'm sorry, Julie.
No, that's okay. No, that's okay. You finish off.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that for contraceptive justice, for example, there are, if you Google abstinence only groups, you'll be shocked. There are a lot of them. And it is, and many of them are, you know, there are a lot of women members, and I don't understand it. I don't get it. But yeah, we have so much left to do.
Mhm. Clayton just asked a quick question. How does this book relate to the other books that you've written? Which I guess James's journey would be the comparative on this one.
Yeah. How does it compare? It is set a little later, a few years later than James's journey. It's about a different issue. James's journey was American history. But I think the way it's similar is that I want to really show what people in that period thought. And if I go back to that it would be so easy to make, in James's case, to make him like me, somebody who would be completely, utterly horrified about slavery and what was going on. But he wasn't us. He lived a lot earlier than us. He was product of his time. He was raised to think these things. And it's the same with, like I said now, with the woman who Hannah was talking about, who said that I'm a mother, I don't have time, I have a household, it is my pride and joy, I don't have time, it is too hard for me to be expected to not only take care of a house and my home. And there's also a couple of discussions between the women, the feminists, Hannah's friends, they're adamantly against birth control. They're aghast that this can even be an issue, that they should even discuss, because it's so horrible. And so in that way it's similar, because then we see how we grew. Because if you only see what people did that agrees with how the part of history that we're proud of that they did, we only show that history, we only learn half of the history. I think we need to look at all of history and see what everybody thought. And it's not pretty, it's shocking. But that's how we learn who we are and who we were. I don't know if that answered your question, Clayton.
I think we're good. We're good. All right. Any other questions from the audience? Well, we've, now it's like, okay, we want to read the book now, right?
Yes, I wish I had it already.
That's like the next step. We need to read the book.
Yes.
Well, congratulations on the release of this book, Helen. On behalf of all of us, we're truly excited for you to release it and for us to read it. And I think that it's a great idea if you're heading to Sweden to be able to do a tour of some of the places, and be able to put a little bit of a follow-up. Maybe it's a live Zoom call where we can all join you, or maybe it's a recording afterwards or something like that. But certainly when you visit these places and you take, photos, or you're put into that place, it grounds us to the book itself. And that would be wonderful for all of us to experience, I think.
That is such a wonderful idea. And one of the places you can go into, it's what's behind you. I think that cathedral was built in the 12th century, if I think I'm right. I have to double check that. I think it's from the 1100s. And it's beautiful. And it is, like I said before, the landmark of Lund. I'm sure everyone who's Swedish here knew exactly where this was when they saw your background. And the countryside, and there's so much I could show you. Yeah, I should do that.
Wonderful. All right.
Thanks so much.
All right. Well, I think that's a great place to close off for today. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining Helen on this exciting journey of her launching her book. And everybody order your copy when you can, and maybe we'll have a book club moment, once we've all had a chance to read it. That would be great if we could all come back together again and continue this conversation. Maybe that's something that you would entertain. I think that it would be wonderful. And thank you, everybody, for joining us from around the world. It's exciting, and what a great moment for Sweden as well this weekend, celebrating during your holiday and a release announcement of your book as well.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I've seen all your messages. Thank you so much. I'm so excited that so many of you could come. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Tack, tack.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you. Hej då in Swedish.
Hej då.
Tack. Hej då.